What's up, everybody? Welcome to another This Week in the House of Fraud. I'm Jordan Harris, host of the Fraud Boxer podcast. I got Brian Davis over here, who's the founder himself of the House of Fraud. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Tired as always because no kids sleep, and that just runs energy low almost every single day. But what's another cup of coffee or seven that can't
Sure.
solve it, right?
Yeah. So we real quick, just because we always talk about this random stuff at the beginning of these things. My cousin Jake got married. Now he is a fan of the shows. He works for SpaceX. He does computer engineering over there. He has a mug from my show, but he just got married this weekend in my hometown outside of Salem, Oregon, and we flew one of those budget airlines
Yeah.
directly into Salem. So it's like this airport that I've been around my whole life that I've never seen anything bigger than like a Gulfstream G5 like fly out of. Full land in the 737-700, like definitely formerly a Spirit Airlines plane because the paint's peeling off and it's yellow underneath. But it was super wild. But man, those types of airlines are rough. Like definitely
I
people that
mean, how long
never
is that
fly.
flight? That's
Hour
the
and a
hard part.
half.
Hour and a half. It's not
Boarding
too
is the
bad,
hard
but
part.
yeah.
Boarding and deplaning. Like so, even like so it was like night before last Sunday night landing back at Burbank. Uh, everybody stands up when it lands and just starts running down the aisle, and I was like, these people have never been on an airplane before. They've never been in civilized society before. Because Salem's not a super nice place. Wild, just wild. It's like unfair. It's like feral people attempting to sit next to each other for an hour and a half, and it's not
A lot of
not
people
good.
that don't have airlines loyalties, so they're like, it doesn't matter. Just get me to where I need to go in the cheapest amount.
And you know that they're all trying to go because like based on the amount of children and the paraphernalia they were wearing, they're trying to go to Disney. I bet you that the flight dollar difference between that airline and the Uber ride that they're about to have to take all the way down to Disneyland is like going to completely wash the fees of just flying to Orange County Airport. So yeah, I mean, I think if I'm in a pinch, I'll fly in that one if I need to get up there quick. But I think I'm just going to stick to Delta from here on out.
Do they have a lounge? Not Delta. I know Delta has a lounge.
No, do you want to know what's super crazy? So, because we had to fly out of Burbank, so I had to drive up from. I live in North Orange County, and I did it. Google said it could take me from 40 minutes to an hour and 45. So
Sounds about
I
right.
I
That's
did the
SoCal.
hour and 45 side because this is Los Angeles and it's Friday. No, it's Thursday. Thursday. Um, it took an hour, a little over an hour. So I get there super early, and I'm like, well, let's just drop the bag, and then Guy Fieri's, man, I'm gonna go to Flavor Town, get a cocktail, get some nachos. Uh, walking up to the Avalo Airlines check-in counter at Burbank. So going to Salem, which means they probably only had that one damn flight the whole day. And I was like, yeah. She's like, you can't drop your bag until an hour before the flight. I'm like, what? Hour before the flight. So I take my huge bag and I go back and I sit in the world's hottest bar. It's probably 100 degrees in there, and it's outside of security, and sit there for like another hour and a half while I wait for it to be right before the flight to drop my bag. Like, why can't I drop my bag and like get it to the back so they can start doing the scanning on it? We'll never
See, if you don't
understand
have
that.
staff, it's just gonna sit right there, clog other things up, and then it's gonna get lost, and you're gonna
There was
file a chargeback.
there was like 5 people there, but I will say too, because it's one of those airlines where you have to pay for every little thing. I'm sure their chargebacks are nuts, but like you got to like this seat costs this much. This seat costs this much. You got to pay for your bag. You got to pay for a carry on. You got to pay to look at yourself in the mirror in the bathroom. All of those sorts of things. Um, I bought one checked bag, so we put everything in one because we're only going for 3 nights, and then I bought the 2 seats, and then the lady's like, "Hey, I'll upgrade you to an exit row for no charge if you want." When I'm finally checking my bag in 1 hour before, I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." Like I'm 6'4", like I could use the extra leg room. And then like we're going through TSA, and I look at the thing, and I realize I'm sitting in an aisle, and I'm like window guy because I'm big, I'm wide, so I got to like lean over every time anybody
You want
walks
the
by.
extra space to lean.
Yeah, but that damn exit row, no extra space like at all. I just gave up my window seat for
Scammed.
an aisle. Yeah, and but the window seat on mine, there was some like short gal sitting in, had the no seat in front of it, so she got the extra leg room. But that should have been mine. All right, should we
Can't
talk
get it
about
back.
fraud?
Let's talk about fraud. Let's talk about payments first. Uh, Oklahoma State is making some headlines because of a decision they made about putting something on their helmets. With NIL funds, they
Ooh.
you can now scan a QR code that is on a player's helmet and send them money. I think it goes to a general fund and it's distributed across everyone. I
So
don't
I
think you
couldn't pay my
necessarily
favorite
can pay
player if he made a good tackle or something.
or cash your bet. You, I guess, technically could, if they covered the spread, tip the program and say, congrats, thank you guys. My first thought is like, we can't have nice things. How is this going to be abused
Don't they have
of like
boosters?
just crowdsourcing, getting involvement? So this is the first one that I've seen doing something like this of like student to student. But I think about like, it's a big school, mm,
Yeah. They should have plenty
fairly
of money. What's their
decent
endowment?
program. Usually big schools, big program, big football
They're
legacy,
making tons of money on their
lots
football, I'm sure.
of drinking in the crowd. And I can imagine a QR code pops on up and be like, hey, what are these payments? I don't remember making these payments while I was at the game. I definitely didn't do that. So I just think about like, is it going to be shown on the TV? If it's shown on the TV, will it be abused? Can people test it and just start dealing that? Who's going to be handling chargebacks? I imagine there's going to be chargebacks. Who is going to like what brand is going to pay an athlete to swap on out the issued QR code with a different brand's QR code? Or what athlete's gonna have some type of clothing or whatever it may be, slap it on their own helmet to go
Yeah.
direct to them? What are the
That's
repercussions
my
of
immediately
that?
where my mind went, is like, someone's gonna put another sticker over the top. So right now, all over the news in LA is like, because we have parking. In LA, you gotta pay for parking everywhere. So all you Midwest people, like, when you go, like, park at your grocery store, you're taking it, like, for granted because
You have to
down
park for the
here,
grocery store as well?
sometimes, and especially on the West Side, and then you usually get a validation if you bought a certain amount of groceries. Like, if you go in and buy a banana, they're not gonna validate you. But yeah, you gotta pay everywhere you go here. So at the beach, a lot of QR codes are
Yep.
now on the signs. Then you go to their app. But people, obviously, just like during COVID on menus and stuff, are placing their own QR code over the top, redirecting people to a fake checkout website, and then taking the money, or scraping the card. The one in Santa Clemente, this guy alleged that he used his card, and then within 1 minute, his wife's card was being used. I think that that's bullshit, but maybe. But I mean, the QR codes. I think this is weird because, first of all, that school has a $1.7 billion endowment, so they got plenty of money. And Oklahoma State, plenty of money, and then their football program is like, it's always on TV. Like,
Yep.
that's over my games. Um, so I don't. They got plenty of people that they can hit up, that alumni that they can donate to the program if they need more than their $1.71 billion endowment. That was their budget is 1.69 billion, so they're scraping right along. Um, I think that that's bullshit. But the QR code thing, I think I've always felt like the QR codes were a stopgap to something better. Do you remember when Apple Pay first started? A bunch of like the Walgreens and the CVSs turned it off because they were
Yep.
trying to do this QR code system with Walmart partnership, where they had an app where, like, you could deposit funds into the app, and then they would scan the QR code on your phone. And then it ended up being like getting breached before they had even gone live with it fully. I've always pictured QR codes as the gap between when everybody had an NFC chip enabled on their actual device. And now you see Apple finally enabling the peer-to-peer payments by tapping the phones and all that. They just
Yep.
put out some new stuff on that. I always felt like the QR codes was just the means to an end, because they had always demoed like when restaurants put a menu on the door. So you don't have to, you can look and see what kind of crap you're going to eat before you even try and go in and get a table and tell you that they're booked up all night. The the idea was is they could embed a NFC chip in there too, and if you're close to an entrance to a store, they did a demo of this, that it would pop up the menu right then and there. Now, I don't think we've ever got there yet, but I think you could do the same thing if you enable them, like these little beacons or things around, like in the tables in the stores and stuff. QR codes always seemed like a means to an end to me. I personally hate them. Now, I do have them right here on my own business cards that I hand out to people, but that's because now people are familiar with
Now
them
you're
and it gets me
justifying
the
it.
views.
You're
Yeah, but like, I
justifying it.
don't want to. I wish I could have some NFC thing in there that only went to me and couldn't be messed with, just like we did with the MV chips. That's what I wish. Um, but that sounds expensive. So
It is. I think there's business cards out there that you can do like the
Yeah,
tap
I don't
to
think
it.
enough. I don't hand them enough. Like, I hand them to enough people to ever do that. Like, yeah, we'll see. Yeah,
I guess
don't
that's the
donate money
transition
to Oklahoma
as you're
State.
going to like you're walking around, you hand these out. The This question has come back again this week to me. And I think it also there's inside the House of Fraud and outside the House of Fraud. This kind of comes like outside the House of Fraud. People see like my network number on LinkedIn and say, "What the hell? How do you get there?" And then inside the program, one of the main bits inside the House of Fraud, one of the main programs is the matchmaking. So the monthly matchmaking members who sign up for the program on the first of the month get a connection saying, "Hey, Jordan, meet Brian. Set up some time throughout this month and connect." So it's kind of like the done for you networking when people are like, I don't know what to say to people. Like, how do I find someone that I want to network with? What the hell does that really even mean? So the benefit of me putting myself out there with content is there aren't many other people who do it consistently, so they're kinda like,
Yeah.
"Who is this Brian guy?" I'll kind of see what he's talking about. Some things relevant to me, some things are not, but it kind of, like, is my icebreaker for people to come to me and be like, "Alright, you caught my attention, I'll learn more." So I at least have this, like, almost safety net of audience traffic coming to my own LinkedIn, and I can kind of use the content as my opener. But for you, I'm kinda curious, like, especially you are more tenured than me in your career and have been doing more conference circuits longer than I
Mhm.
have. So I'm kinda curious from, like, your perspective, like, how do you network? Like, how
Yeah.
do you even think
I
about someone comes to you, be like, "Hey, Jordan, I wanna meet these people. What do I do? I feel weird.
Mhm.
I don't wanna be rejected." And, like, my solution within the House of Fraud is the matchmaking program. Don't reach out to people. Have the connections come to you. Make it easy.
So I will say how very COVID of you to make your connections that way online. Um, so no, historically, so I have been in this industry since 2011, maybe 2010. 2010 was when I first started experiencing and working with fraud, but 2011 was when I officially joined the industry, like full time. And during that time, there wasn't very many of us. So
Yep.
when you would go to a thing like an MRC or Visa CyberSource used to host their own little meetup over here in Laguna Beach. But when you would go, you would see the same few people, and there wasn't a lot of people. There was hundreds of us, not thousands of us like there are now. There was hundreds of us, and honestly, the social aspect of the events themselves was where I had met the majority of the OGs that I still work with today. Now, there was only a few companies. There was like Certify, there was CyberSource, there was Threat Metrics, and then Count. Really, well, those were like the big boys. And then there wasn't all these little upstarts because the capital that it took to get into the space was enormous at the time, and nobody really knew the space existed. So you had like payment processors, normally a lot of ISOs. So people like companies that were handling processing for you for SMBs, they would set it all up. They had the relationships with the actual acquirers. They would process payments over their own ISO network. And then inside those ISOs, you would get assigned a fraud tool, usually based on the package that you wanted to buy. So whoever they had the relationships. Now, like, like a lot of the smaller pieces, like the chargebacks 911, those sorts of things get assigned through ISOs, as well as like let's say a smaller acquirer like US Bank Corp, or that's not the name of the one, but it's one that's over here in Agora Hills, really small one. But that's like what a lot of LA people use. Um, but having the cocktail hours, having lunches used to be like you would just sit down at a table and that's where you'd have lunch, and you couldn't go off site. Now people go off site, they schedule lunches because there's so many
Yep.
businesses they want to have a lunch with you. Used to be you would eat the conference food and then you have the conference cocktails, and that's how you just would meet people. But you would see them so often and like that familiar face that you would just start talking to each other. And then you would see them in Vegas, and you'd see them in Napa, then you'd see them over here in Laguna Beach. And then you just kind of became friends. And people didn't jump around jobs as much. They were pretty stable. So like someone that was at like Visa Verify before Visa bought them, like they were probably some of the founders, like Matt and Rick over there. They were there forever, So the same thing with like Cardinal Commerce, like all those teams were like the same people. So you knew the pieces you had to go to, and you knew that those people were still going to be there, and that's just who they are now. So many people came in these companies. There was so much capital that got invested into our space that like these conferences grew, which is great, with tons of new people, but also with that comes tons of new vendors, tons of new ideas, and I think we needed the fresh ideas. I still remember to this day when Kevin over at SIFT was at it was demoing some of the early SIFT stuff over at MRC, and everybody was skeptical about this machine learning thing. We write rules. That's what we do. And like now, if you don't have machine learning, if you don't have automation, like you're just not gonna exist. But we needed those fresh ideas in the space at the time, and it just got to be so big, and the amount of merchants for the amount of vendors is out of whack now from what it used to be. So all of these vendors are fighting for merchant attention and pulling them away from more of the social aspects that used to be at the conferences. There still are happy hours, there still are dinners, but those dinners now are very exclusive to like this company's users and a couple of prospects. And now
Yeah.
every single one of them had it. Used to be like, bro, like I'm telling you, like I wasn't a certified customer at first when I was at Fandango, but I was at their parties all the time because they would just, it was like Monday night they had a party, Tuesday night they had a party, Wednesday night they had a party, and everybody would just go to those one parties. So everybody would meet each other. Now we don't see each other except for now at the Ethica party on Wednesday
Right.
night, at MRC. But it's just like you have to kind of I understand where people come from where they have to like I just declined one while we've been on this call. Another BDR sales guy tried to add me because I got the next 2 weeks are going to be conferences, tried to add me and I
What
know he
about
just wants to talk
people not
sales.
necessarily just like vendor to merchant? What about merchant to merchant?
Like
So like
merchant to merchant. I
how
would
do how
say
do you go about that today?
now
Today.
I still do the OG way where I still go to as many happy hours as I possibly can. I think that your approach of doing like the social hours, speed dating, all those sorts of things is the right way for this generation of fraud fighter because these are the COVID generation that as they're not chronically online, but they're always online. They're used to being on Zoom.
Yeah.
And any way that you can mimic their day that they're used to meet new people is what's going to happen. I think Identique when they were a thing, they they used to have a annual or even maybe twice a year where they would send a box and everybody would get on it was literally a Zoom call for a couple of hours and just say who you are, what you do, and it'd take about an hour just to get through that part, and then they would have just a quick couple of presentation. But that was a good way to have people get to like talk to each other, learn each other's names, learn what each other look like. So if you do see them in the real world, like it's not as nerve wracking to go to somebody that you've never seen or you've never met before.
Yeah, the
So
way
I
I
think
think
that
about it is
yeah,
like my struggle was like starting at earlier companies and being the only fraud person. I didn't necessarily know what parties were out there, what conferences were
yeah,
even out there. And if I did, I didn't have the budget to get to them. So it's like, if
yeah.
that is the way to connect with people, I'm left on the outside and not able to actually meet with people. Or
I
how
can
many
see
people have
that.
you met and be like, hey, I had a great conversation with you, and then you never talk to them again. And the communication is just totally dropped off of like, there's no follow up. There is no like the ability
Mhm.
to just stay in touch because once we get back to our job, it's like back to the grind. I got tasks. I got to make sure these
Yeah.
people,
I
and it
I
makes it
say
hard.
I guess, like, when I look at that, like, I'm trying to think back through, like, outside of these events, like, it used to be there'd be, like, regional happy hours, like, Verify was really good about doing regional happy hours. Sardine's really good about doing it now, Sift is too.
It's
Um,
because
the
started with the wrist saloon, I think traditionally.
Yeah, and that's a cool way. Now, like, even at the Risk Saloon or the Risk Review that Sift did, like, it wasn't a drinking one because I know when people are like, "Oh, we got a drink to do this." No, you don't. Like, you don't have to drink. Like, there was no drinking. There was soda and there was apps, and a quick, cool little presentation in and out of there. I thought it was great. Um, the but they used to do the regional things a little more, which I thought was a little more helpful because people don't have budget. Now, I'm looking back and like I would say I didn't participate or know that many people. I think the virtual webinars are a good thing now that we have the technology and the bandwidth, like the actual like technical like computer bandwidth, like the internet bandwidth to do these sorts of things. But I would say had if I didn't go to events like I did back then, and fortunately I did have the budget to do it, I wouldn't know the people that I know today. And I don't think that I'd have the expertise that I have today because I was able to talk to all these people early, see their solutions early, see how they evolve, find out in my mind where they fit in my processes. So now when I encounter any sort of new website or new job, I know what the different pieces of the transaction are and what I might need based on if there's risk there or not.
Yeah.
But I would say like I would be fine this day and age to start, but I wouldn't have been fine in the middle part from when I was going to happy hours versus the technology didn't exist to have the big Zoom meetings. I think the Zoom stuff is really cool. Like I was a big fan of like the Zoom happy hours during COVID. I always
Yeah.
thought those were great. Uh,
I
now the
mean, you don't
world's
really
so
have an
global.
alternative at that point,
Yeah.
and then you're able to just people are just craving attention, connection.
Yeah. And I'm a
So
very much I need attention constantly. I need validation
you
constantly.
don't say. You
Yeah,
you?
believe it or not, the shy personality does crave attention. Um, I think that like look, not to just plug the House of Fraud, even though that's what we're supposed to be doing here. I think that the House of Fraud is a good example of what a special group of people should be doing in a community because there are other communities. There's, the governing body that we always talk about, like that we love their conference has a community, but like literally anything that gets posted in there, anything, the very first comment always is a vendor saying, DM me, I can help you with that. Like every single time. And that's not helpful. Like any vendor that's listening to that or to this, that is not helpful. Answer the question and say, if you have any additional questions, we could talk to you about that if you want. Answer the question. Don't try and take it offline. But with House of Fraud, like just today, this morning, before we jumped on here, I was commenting back because we're talking about scams and
Yep.
what the legislation is going to look like, what the process is going to look like when banks have to hold the bag. And are they going to slow it down? Are they not? And there's a whole thing. Like I have my opinion. We've talked about this on this show before. Talked about it on my show that there needs to be a certain amount of accountability for the consumer based on how much friction they went through and still did it. And and there was just one posted there today, and this is a real conversation that's happening on there. This isn't a please DM me, we can help you out and fix your faster payments. This is a real conversation about what's going to happen and what it could look like. And it's like, well, one of the banks is already planning on slowing down their faster payments 6 hours. And then me on there is like, well, why don't they just make it 3 to 5 days ACH, then they don't have to hold any risk. Like, why even invest when they could just roll it all the way back and just put delays on things? So it's just like these are meaningful conversations that we're really having on there that then people get to know your name. Like I've met people out of House of Fraud already, several of them. One of them that was just he was a frequent poster on there. I had a job opening and I reached out to her and I was like, hey, why don't you apply for this job to see if there's a fit? There wasn't a fit at that time, but like that's a real community. I noticed that she was posting useful things and I
Yeah.
thought of her when I opened a job and I went to her. And that's now how we meet people, I guess.
You show your value, able to contribute. I think that's the biggest bit, even going back to the vendors of, hey, DM me isn't valuable or helpful. And you're putting the effort on the individual to be like, all right, what did Jordan say to DM him about? I got to go now look up Jordan. All right, what's his title? I got to find him on LinkedIn. What's the company? I got to do that. So there's a lot of effort in the buyer's research in able to be like, is this even worth my time to DM them? Like, I know where
Yeah.
it's going to lead to. Like, even on LinkedIn, like, we're on LinkedIn to make money. You're either trying to get a job, you
Yep.
make money. You're trying to make sales, you make money. They're really, once people retire, they move off of LinkedIn. Once they get a job, if they use LinkedIn to get a job, they move off LinkedIn. If they start a business, a consulting agency, they're there to gain attention, feedback, to build a product to sell. So if you're on LinkedIn, it's ultimately to make money. There's just a lot of different ways to leverage that to make money. But it's the people that add value and make it easy. Be like, hey, Jordan's sharing all this content. This individual sharing all this valuable content. You know what? What they're talking about, the way they talk about things, there could actually be a fit here because they've been just providing this value consistently, came on your radar just simply by helping people in a certain area that they have an expertise in and say, you know what, let's explore this further. You don't have to go click down 17 different funnels to say, hey, Jordan, saw you're
Mhm.
hiring. Let's talk. DM me if you're interested. The shift is like, yes, it takes a little bit more effort up front. But for you as Jordan, be like, oh, I've seen this person. I didn't
Mhm.
know this was going to be an opportunity when they started, but I have an opportunity today. You know what? This is worth my time to reach out to them to say, what you've done is pretty cool. I'd love to learn more. And that person also, through you giving your own value, be like, hey, I know who you are. I am actually looking for a job, and this job is interesting for me to look at. The
Yeah.
value's up front. I mean, someone else coined this within like the marketing or sales agency, like zero click content. Give the value there. They know how to find you.
Yes.
The content is there. If you are, especially if you're like, hey, we sell support and we're really supportive and helpful in all of this, but you're making people do all this work up front, there's a misalignment in that. So help people out, give value. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
always a bad thing.
I will say I just clicked on, I get a daily digest from the other website too. Literally clicked on the very first one. It was, somebody asking about document verification, and the first comment and the only comment is, "You should look at us. DM me." So,
But like, let's use that as an example. Like, to be helpful is if you're looking at this, they're probably very in the early stages, would be my guess of understanding what tools are out there.
yeah,
So it's like there's two ways to go about that in my perspective. My perspective would be, hey, here are ways you set your criteria to kind of determine what is the right fit for you. Now they could put their own POV on it and kind of put the bias of
yeah,
these are the things to look for. And if you go through these, then you're going to come find us, but you know what? It'll help kind of filter out a lot of noise and help them. That's if they're
you
in the
know,
early bit. Or the other one is here are some ways of people who kind of doing it today. Here's how like we think about it at blah. And then it's like here are the values of our own personal POV. And then again, it's all front loaded. And then you're helping them do their own research, either by giving them a checklist or template, kind of like a mini RFP of like who should even be included in my RFP, and it's set for the criteria of, well, if they go through this, they're going to land
yeah,
on us and say, at least include us. Or, you know what? Jordan provided this and Jordan was pretty helpful. I'll at least give him a shot at this because he helped offload a lot
yeah.
of that.
I will just say, like, the low effort that company's representative just did and called itself a director. I'm surprised it didn't call himself a VP. Uh, I would not be interested in. I know that company, and I know that their other product is pretty good. But based on that, if I didn't know anything about it and that low effort response that guy just put in there, I would be like, oh no,
Well,
you
think
know.
about the conversation in the House of Fraud last week about someone said, hey, has anyone heard about this vendor? I don't really appreciate, like, I'm starting a new job. Here's what I've learned about the tactics they've used on our company. I don't really like it. Then following that is people's feedback and impressions of, "Oh, you know what? I probably won't talk to that company again. They just reached out to us." So I I think people just don't understand the value of the relationships and reputation and the impressions you leave when you do things like that. So being able to actually, I know a lot of teams face an extreme internal pressures, and a lot of the job does suck and is very difficult for a lot of people. Yes, in sales, earnings are probably higher than almost any other role across every other business consistently, but it's your reputation and relationships. And if you go to another company, you want that reputation and you want those relationships. So there is this long term impact there. And I'm just using the House of Fraud, the example of like that vendor conversation last week
Mhm.
on specific tactics they used on and they were just walking to a new role. So they're like, hey, does anyone have any feedback on this? I don't really know them. I'm not familiar with this, but this is my impression. I want to get out of this conversation as quickly as possible. That's the impression, and those are the conversations that are happening behind the scenes when companies do lead with these types of tactics. And now, as if I'm working in the business, I need to reassess kind of like, hey, what's our messaging outreach strategies of the trade-offs? Maybe the business says, you know what, we're okay with that. We're cool with the predictable revenue model from 10 years ago. And they might say, hey, we need to be careful with our relationships. And sometimes it can kind of be funding stages where they're at aggressive goals and kind of what's creating those internal pressures. But that's how I think about it. My own personal bit of how can I actually help people in why they're looking for it. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's the right
want to be
way.
careful of like if I'm not in the room, if I'm not in the house of fraud, how do people talk about me?
Yeah. Well, The only way to know how people might be talking about you is
Hit apply. We'll see you on the other side, because no one goes to school for fighting fraud. Navigating career is nearly impossible. Hope to see you there.
see you next week, everybody.